The cyclone that hit Orissa in October 1999 killed thousands of people and devastated hundreds of villages. For 2 dreadful nights, Prashant, a young man, was marooned on the roof of a house. On the 3rd day, he decided to go to his village. Did he find his family? Hi children, here comes a story and it talks about the storm. It's a cyclone, and you know what cyclone is? Cyclone is Sural Katrin Solronla, that is cyclone. And that hit where? It hit the coastal town of Ersama. And this Ersama is in Orissa state in the year 1999. And a young boy named Prashant, he faced this strong wind or the strong storm, the cyclone, and finally he reached his village. Now the details of how he worked hard to help his family, his villagers, his friends, and also how he overcame or how he tried to fight the destruction that was caused by the storm is really inspiring. It's very interesting when you see to the whole lesson and see how much of courage this boy had and see that positive approach that he had towards life. So let's take the positives of Prashant and how he faced the challenge in his life. Okay, so that is what is the lesson about, and the lesson is weathering the storm in Ersama. Shall we? Now this is from your Moments book and it is the 6th lesson. Shall we turn to page number 37? The 6th lesson, page number 37. Shall we start? I'm going to read the lesson and then give you the hard words and its meanings and explain paragraph after paragraph. Come on, let's start. On 27th October 1999, 7 years after his mother's death, Prashant had gone to the block headquarters of Ersama, a small town in coastal Orissa, some 18 kilometers from his village, to spend the day with a friend. In the evening, a dark and menacing storm quickly gathered. Winds beat against the houses with a speed and fury that Prashant had never witnessed before. Heavy and incessant rain filled the darkness. Ancient trees were uprooted and crashed to the earth. Screams rent the air as people and houses were swiftly washed away. The angry waters swirled into his friend's house, neck deep. The building was of brick and mortar and was strong enough to survive the devastation of the wind's velocity of 350 km per hour. But the cold terror of the family grew with the crashing of trees that had got uprooted and fallen on their house, sometime in the middle of the night, damaging its roof and walls. Prashant was a native of a village in the coastal state of Odisha. Prashant was from that village, from Orissa, and it was a coastal state. Coastal state means a state near the ocean, you can say. So on 27th October in the year 1999, you know what happened? This boy, Prashant, he went to visit his friend. So in Ersama, it was a small town, and that was the headquarter in Jakatpura district. So that is around 18 kilometers, not very far. So he had been there, and this Prashant had also lost his mother 7 years ago. That day what happened was a strong storm that evening. It gathered. It started a strong storm, ஒரு சுழல் காற்று வந்துடுச்சு. So it was very furious. Very furious means very dangerous. And due to that wind, that storm, finally it started to rain. And it was a continuous rain. Everywhere people started to scream, because if it rains so heavily, and along with the storm, what will happen is these trees will get uprooted. Just imagine that scene. If the trees get uprooted means அப்படியே வேரோட மரங்கள்லாம் அப்படியே வெளியே வந்துருச்சுன்னா எப்படி இருக்கும், அந்த அளவுக்கு storm. It destroyed the houses, and some trees fell on them. Water flowed. It just gushed means அப்படியே அடிச்சுக்கிட்டு வந்து it swept away the houses. வீடெல்லாம் அப்படியே அடிச்சுக்கிட்டு போகுது. And the water came to the neck level. neck வரைக்கும் வந்துருச்சு. ஃப்ரெண்டுடைய ஹவுஸில் தான் இருக்கான். And it came to the neck. And that house, had an upstairs must be. So what people do is, always when there is a flood or storm or something like that, we try to go up, that is to the upstairs. So all of them were so scared. Nobody it was 350, that that strong wind உடைய அளவு என்னன்னு பார்த்தா, it was 350 kilometers per hour. Just imagine, அப்படியே அவ்வளோ ஒரு ஸ்பீடு, 350 kilometers per hour. ஒரு ட்ரெயின் கூட அவ்வளோ ஃபாஸ்ட்டாலாம் ரீச் பண்ண முடியாது. ட்ரெயின் இப்படி பாஸ் பண்ணாலே how it will be, அப்படியே இழுத்துக்கிட்டே போகிற மாதிரி இருக்கும். பட் இட் வாஸ் ஈவன் மோர் ஃபாஸ்டர், வெரி வெரி ஃபாஸ்ட், very ferocious, very furious the wind was. And his friends' family also were very scared, because it was in the middle of the night. Trees fell on the houses. It damaged the roofs, the walls, the buildings. Oh, that was really a very bad scene. So this is what happened on the 27th October 1999. Let's see to the meanings. Menacing. Menacing means dangerous. Fury is very strong. Incessant. Incessant means continuous. Continuous rains. Ancient. Ancient means old. Rent. Rent means filled. Swirled. Swirled means flowed along with a whirling motion. Whirling na அப்படி சுற்றி வர்றது. Mortar is a mixture of lime, cement, sand and water used to construct what? Construct the buildings. The crazed destruction wrought by the cyclone and the surge of the ocean continued for next 36 hours. Although wind speeds had reduced somewhat by the next morning, to escape the waters rising in the house, Prashant and his friend's family had taken refuge on the roof. Prashant will never forget the shock he experienced at his first glimpse of the devastation wrought by the super cyclone in the grey light of the early morning. Now the storm continued the next 1.5 days. The wind had gradually it slowed down. And to escape this rising levels of the water, what happened was, Prashant along with his friend's family, they took shelter where? On the roof of the house. That is where they can be safe, because the water level was rising. And as the day dawned means early morning. Dawn means early morning. Prashant saw the destruction caused by the super cyclone. It was not an easy thing. Oh, that was really bad. That is what we see in this paragraph. Surge means gush. Refuge, shelter. Wrought means produced as a result of something. A raging, deadly brown sheet of water covered everything as far as the eye could see. Only fractured cement houses stood still in a few places. Bloated animal carcasses and human corpses floated in every direction. All round, even huge old trees had fallen. 2 coconut trees had fallen on the roof of their house. This was a blessing in disguise, because the tender coconuts from the trees kept the trapped family from starving in the several days that followed. Now see what happened. As far as Prashant could see, they were all on the rooftop, isn't it? So as far as they could see, they saw a cover of muddy brown water. Everywhere covered with mud. It looked like a brown sheet covering the land. There were houses that was destroyed and then full of water. That area was surrounded by water. And then dead bodies of animals and human beings floated in the water. And then huge trees had fallen. And all those trees were also floating. And 2 coconut trees had fallen on the roof of their house. That friend's house, their house only he was in. So 2 coconut trees fell there. First, in the beginning it was like those 2 coconut trees damaged the roofs and the walls of the house. But later what happened was, அது ஒரு லக்கா போயிடுச்சு அவங்களுக்கு, ஒரு அதிர்ஷ்டமாக இருந்தது. It was very beneficial for them, they were all trapped in the house, right? They were all inside the house, and they could not come out of the house because of the rains. So they were caught inside the house. What they did was, they ate this raw coconuts, from these trees, and they saved themselves from dying due to starvation. Patniya illa, ena saapad illa, onnu illa, they could not go outside also. So these coconuts, that tree helped them. The 2 coconut trees had fallen on their house. So both these coconut trees helped them in giving them the coconuts. So this is how they saved themselves from dying. Now let's see to the meanings. Fractured. Fractured means what? Broken. Bloated. Bloated means swollen. Abde vingi poi. Okay. Animal carcasses. Animal carcasses, the dead bodies of animals. Next is blessing in disguise. Blessing in disguise means a misfortune that eventually had good results. அப்படின்னா ஒரு கெட்டதும் நன்மையாக மாறி இருக்கு, நல்லதாக மாறி இருக்கு அப்படிங்கிறது தான் blessing in disguise. அப்படியே தெரியாமலே ஒரு blessing வந்திருக்கு அவங்களுக்கு. அந்த from where? From the coconut trees. And then comes tender. Tender means soft. Tender means soft. Okay, let's see what happened next. For the next 2 days, Prashant sat huddled with his friend's family in the open on the rooftop. They froze in the cold and incessant rain. The rain water washed away Prashant's tears. The only thought that flashed through his mind was whether his family had survived the fury of the super cyclone. Was he to be bereaved once again? 2 days later, which seemed to Prashant like 2 years, the rain ceased and the rainwater slowly began to recede. Prashant was determined to seek out his family without further delay. But the situation was still dangerous, and his friend's family pleaded with Prashant to stay back a little while longer. But Prashant knew he had to go. Now what happened over here, do you think? They spent the next 2 days on the rooftop. Very sad situation, right? They had to stay right on the roof. All of them were scared because they didn't know what next will happen. Everyone was so scared that they all sat together in a group. It was very cold because of the continuous rain. And Prashant was just crying. He was in tears. And that rainwater had washed away his tears. He was worried about his family members. Maybe he could have lost another family member and would be in sorrow or grief over the loss of a loved one once again, because he had lost his mother, isn't it? And this thought kept worrying Prashant. Whether his thought was, அம்மாவை தான் தொலைச்சிட்டோம், இப்போ வேறு யாராவது என் ஃபேமிலியில் யாரையாவது தொலைச்சிட்டோமோ இந்த ரெயினில், மறுபடியும் அந்த சாரோ அவனுக்குள்ளே. அதனால் he was just crying, but that tears were washed away by the rain. And then the rain stopped after 2 days. This 2 days looked like as if it was 2 years long. ஏன்னா இந்த 2 days பாஸ் பண்ணுறது ஒரு பயங்கர கஷ்டமாக இருந்தது எல்லாருக்கும். This showed that it was very difficult. The time never passed. His worry was it was increasing. He just wanted to go and see his family. Now the rain had stopped, and the water was slowly receding. Receding means it was reducing gradually. It was quite dangerous to go out, but he did not want to waste any more time. So he just wanted to leave that friend's house and go and find his family members. But his friend's family, they requested Prashant to stay back, but he said no, he has to leave. Now let's see to the word meanings. Huddled. Huddled means together in a group. They all sat together in a group. Flashed through his mind. Flashed through his mind means came to his mind. Bereaved. Bereaved means to have lost a family member or a friend to death. Bereaved. And then comes recede. Recede means reduce. What is recede? Recede means reduce. He equipped himself with a long sturdy stick and then started on his 18-kilometer expedition back to his village through the swollen flood waters. It was a journey he could never forget. He constantly had to use the stick to locate the road to determine where the water was most shallow. At places, it was waist deep and progress was slow. At several points, he lost the road and had to swim. After some distance, he was relieved to find 2 friends of his uncle who were also returning to their village. They decided to move ahead together. As they waded through the waters, the scenes they witnessed grew more and more macabre. They had to push away many human bodies, men, women, children, and carcasses of dogs, goats, and cattle that the current swept against them as they moved ahead. In every village that they passed, they could barely see a house standing. Prashant now wept out loud and long. He was sure that his family could not have survived this catastrophe. Now let me explain this paragraph. You know what he did? He took a long stick, and with the help of a long stick, he started. And how many kilometers long he had to go? 18 kilometers long his journey was. If he has to reach his home, he has to walk 18 kilometers. Now as he passed through the flood water, what happened? The journey, oh my God, it was just registered in his mind. He can never forget that. He had to use a long stick, to guide him and find where there is way to go, the path. And where the water was shallow. Shallow means கம்மியா இருக்கிற தண்ணி எங்கே கம்மியாக இருக்கோ அங்கே அந்த இடத்துல அப்படி குச்சி வச்சு கணிச்சு அப்படி போகிறது. And at some places the water was waist deepனா இடுப்பளவு இருந்தது. And then some places it was low. So sometimes he lost a track of the road. There will be no roads only, and he had to swim and drown also inside the water. After some time what happened, he was a bit relieved. கொஞ்சம் ஒரு சந்தோஷம், ஒரு பெருமூச்சு வந்தது. Why? Because he got company of two friends who were Prashant's uncle's friends, and they were also returning to the same village. So he was a bit relieved. Relievedனா கொஞ்சம் சந்தோஷம், அப்பா யாரோ கிடைச்சிட்டாங்க அப்படிங்கிற மாதிரி அந்த ஒரு ஃபீல். So both these friends were his uncle's friends, and all of them, they all walked together. And as the group was going, the scenes, அங்கே பார்த்த scenes எல்லாம் very horrible it was. Horrible means they could not see. Let's see what all they saw. They had to push the dead bodies. Just imagine, in between dead bodies and dead animals, if you have to walk, it's not that easy, isn't it? So the dead bodies were there. And then whichever village they crossed, they could only see one single house, not more than that. All the other houses were destroyed. It was just swept away. So as Prashant saw these villages one after the other, and he only saw one house in a village, that he really, his fear grew. Now fear grew na, இன்னும் பயம் வந்துருச்சு, அதிகமான பயம். So he started to cry loudly, and he was sure that his family members would have not survived the disaster. So he was totally out of his he never believed that. He thought, okay, all have gone, all of them are dead. So he was totally out of control, and he started to cry loudly. Now let's see to the word meanings. Expedition means journey. Waded na swam, அப்படியே நீச்சல் அடிச்சிட்டு போகிறது. Macabre means horrible. And then comes catastrophe. Catastrophe means disaster. What's catastrophe? Catastrophe means disaster. Eventually Prashant reached his village Kalikuda. His heart went cold. Where their home once stood, there were only remnants of its roof. Some of their belongings were caught, mangled, and twisted in the branches of trees just visible above the dark waters. Young Prashant decided to go to the Red Cross shelter to look for his family. Among the first people he saw in the crowd was his maternal grandmother. Weak with hunger, she rushed to him, her hands outstretched, her eyes brimming. It was a miracle. They had long given him up for dead. Quickly, word spread, and his extended family gathered around him and hugged him tight in relief. Prashant anxiously scanned the motley, battered group. His brother and sister, his uncles and aunts, they all seemed to be there. Eventually means slowly Prashant reached his village Kalikuda. Kalikuda was his village. And when he went there, he saw something, and he became speechless. Numb he was, because he could not see anything. Only the remains of his house. Remnants means small remaining quantities. All the remains of his house he could see. ஒன்றுமே பார்க்கல, வீடே இல்லை. அந்த கொஞ்சமாக ஏதாவது அங்கங்கே அந்த வீட்டுடைய ஒரு சில திங்ஸ் மட்டும் அங்கங்கே பார்க்க முடிஞ்சது. All the belongings were scattered in the water, and things hung on the branches of the trees. அப்படியே அந்த ஃப்ளட் வாட்டரில் எல்லாம் அப்படியே மெதுக்கிட்டு இருந்தது. So he decided to look for his family. what he did was he went to the Red Cross. The Red Cross was giving shelter to all the people who were affected by the floods. So he very well knew that they will be in that place only, that is the Red Cross shelter. So he went to search for his family. And once when he went there, he could see the first person whom he could see in the group was his maternal grandmother. Maternal grandmother na amma udiya amma paatiye da first paatharu, and she appeared very weak, but she was very happy to see Prashant, because all of them thought that Prashant died. But when she saw that Prashant was alive, she was very happy, and she just came with her hands outstretched. Outstretched means அப்படியே கையை ரெண்டையும் விரிச்சிக்கிட்டு அப்படியே ஓடி வந்தாங்களாம். She was so happy, and her eyes brimming means அப்படியே கண்ணிலேருந்து தண்ணி ஊற்றுது. So eyes full of tears, and it was a miracle for her to see Prashant. மிரக்கலுங்கிறது ஒரு அதிசயம். பிரசாந்தை திரும்பி அவங்க பார்ப்பாங்கன்னு நினைக்கல. So they saw Prashant, so she saw Prashant, and she was very, very happy. And then what happened, slowly this news spread to the other places also in the shelter. Okay, so when everyone came to know, each one from their family, family members started to gather around. They started to come to Prashant. So one after the other came to Prashant. His brother, his sister, his uncles, his aunts. So all of them came near him. So he was really happy to see all of them. And the word meanings are: remnants means small remaining quantities, eyes brimming, that means eyes full of tears. And then motley is very desperate na அப்படியே பார்க்காம போயிடுவேனோ பார்க்க மாட்டானோ அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு ஏக்கம், that is desperate, motley. And then battered means injured. Okay, so these are the word meanings in these paragraphs that you saw. I think you understood till here. Come on, let's see what happens next. By the next morning, as he took in the desperate situation in the shelter, he decided to get a grip over himself. He sensed a deathly grief settling upon the 2,500 strong crowd in the shelter. 86 lives were lost in the village. All the 96 houses had been washed away. It was their 4th day at the shelter. So far they had survived on green coconuts, but there were too few to go around such a tumult of people. Prashant, all of 19 years, decided to step in as leader of his village, if no one else did. He organized a group of youths and elders to jointly pressurize the merchant once again to part with his rice. This time, the delegation succeeded and returned triumphantly, wading through the receding waters with food for the entire shelter. No one cared that the rice was already rotting. Branches from fallen trees were gathered to light a reluctant and slow fire on which to cook the rice. For the first time in 4 days, the survivors at the cyclone shelter were able to fill their bellies. His next task was to organize a team of youth volunteers to clean the shelter of filth, urine, vomit, and floating carcasses, and to tend to the wounds and fractures of the many who had been injured. The next morning, Prashant realized he had to come out of his emotions. So he had to take charge of the situation. Somebody has to lead the group. And it was a huge crowd. Around 2,500 people were there in the shelter. Very sad, all of them were. They had lost everything in the storm, right? 86 people had been killed. And also, this 4 days that they were staying in the shelter, that place they were in, that camp they were staying, they were only eating raw coconuts. but that was not sufficient for such a large crowd. Now Prashant, who was just 19 years, he was very young, but what he did was he decided to lead the crowd, and all the villagers were so disturbed. What he did was he first formed a group of villagers. There were elders, there were youths. Youths means young people like you. Elders, little older people also were there. And what they did was, the first plan was, Prashant asked them to force the local merchant, அங்கே உள்ள சின்ன சின்ன கடைங்க இருக்குல்ல, அரிசி கடைங்கள்லாம், அந்த அரிசி கடையில் உள்ள மர்ச்சண்ட்டை வந்து ஃபோர்ஸ் பண்ணி அவங்களுக்கு ஸ்டாக் கொடுக்க சொல்கிறாரு. என்ன ஸ்டாக்கு? அரிசி மூட்டைங்களை. ஸோ தட் இந்த அரிசி மூட்டையை போட்டு சாப்பாடு செஞ்சால் என்ன ஆகும்? 2500 people can eat. So what this group did, this group went to that local merchant, போய் அந்த அரிசி மூட்டையை, they swam back அப்படியே நீச்சல் அடிச்சுக்கிட்டே, because everywhere there was water, right? So they brought அந்த அரிசி மூட்டைங்களை கொண்டு வந்து, they knew that it was getting rotten. அரிசி தண்ணியில் விழுந்துட்டாலே அது என்ன, தண்ணியில் போட்டாலே அது அப்படியே கெட்டு போன மாதிரி இருந்தாலும் பரவாயில்ல, பசிக்கு they wanted something to eat. So what they did, they went and brought that, and they took the small branches of the trees, the broken trees and all that. It was totally wet, but still these small branches of trees, broken trees, was taken, and those branches were used to kindle a fire. Slowly they started to make fire out of that. They tried to burn those branches. That was a very difficult task, but still they made fire, and they cooked rice, and after 4 days, all those survivors ate their food. And the second task was, he called the young boys of that village, the survivors, அங்கே இருந்தவங்க, அந்த 2500 people இருந்தாங்கல்ல, from there he called all the young people, and what did they do? The next task was, they removed all the garbage. இந்த dirt எல்லாம் இருந்தால் வந்து அந்த ஷெல்டரில் dirt இருந்தால் they are going to get disease, isn't it? So the first thing what he did was, he called them to clean the place. So they cleaned the shelter of filth, that is urine irundirukum, vomit irundirukum, and then the floating dead bodies, and what they did, and also they tried to tend means the adipatta kaal fracture aanadhu, யாருக்கெல்லாம் fracture ஆயிருந்த அடிபட்டது, அந்த மாதிரி ஆட்களை வந்து they started to take care of them. So this is how he started to take the lead, and he became the leader of the village, and slowly all this task were done by whom? By Prashant. See to the meanings. Tumult is uproar of a disorderly crowd force. That is the shout of a crowd that was not very organized. That is called as tumult. And then comes triumphantly. Triumphantly means victoriously. Then comes victoriously அப்படின்னா ஜெயிக்கிறது. And then bellies means stomach. What do you mean by bellies? Bellies means stomach. On the 5th day, a military helicopter flew over the shelter and dropped some food parcels. It then did not return. The youth task force gathered empty utensils from the shelter. Then they deputed the children to lie in the sand left by the waters around the shelter with these utensils on their stomach, to communicate to the passing helicopters that they were hungry. The message got through, and after that the helicopter made regular rounds of the shelter, airdropping food and other basic needs. Prashant found that a large number of children had been orphaned. He brought them together and put up a polythene sheet shelter for them. Women were mobilized to look after them, while the men secured food and materials for the shelter. 4 days passed, and on the 5th day after the cyclone, a military helicopter flew over the shelter. the military helicopters during this time of disaster, they come around to see, to check if there are people in danger or if they are in need of food. So what they did, they flew over the shelter and dropped food parcels. After that, they didn't return. But one day, dropping food will not be enough, right? So what Prashant did, he gathered the people there, the youth, especially the young people. And what he did, he called the children also. So the children were made to lie in the sand. The children were there, the small children, they were made to lie down. And what he did was, he asked these children to keep the utensils on their stomach. Utensils means பாத்திரங்க, இந்த சில்வர் பாத்திரம்லாம் இருக்குல்ல, தட்டுங்க, அந்த மாதிரி அவங்க ஸ்டமக் மேலே வச்சு அப்படியே படுத்திருக்க சாண்டில் அப்படியே படுத்திருந்தா அது என்ன ஆகும், அது இந்த ஹெலிகாப்டர்ஸ் மேலே போகும்போது they can see down. அந்த சில்வர் பாத்திரங்கள்லாம் ஒரு சிலது அப்படியே ஷைன் ஆகும் இல்லையா சன்னில். ஸோ தே கேன் see and they will come to know that these people, there are people over here and they need food. So to indicate that, to send that kind of a message only, this plan was made. So they made the children lie down in the sand and utensils were kept on their stomach. Now the helicopters got the message and they returned with food and other necessities also for the crowd at the shelter. And one more thing Prashant saw was, there was a large number of children who had been orphaned. Orphaned means a child who loses either one or both of his parents to death. Orphan na appaavo ammaviyo tolachirunda இறந்திருந்தா அவங்க, they are called as orphans. Those children are called as orphans. So what he did was, Prashant put all these children together under a polythene sheet or a tent madri katti. What he did, he took the women in the shelter and he placed the women there. He asked the women to take care and look after the children. And also the men, he gathered all the men, and these men were the ones who arranged food for everyone. So women were taking care of the children and men were arranging food for the shelter. As the weeks passed, Prashant was quick to recognize that the women and children were sinking deeper and deeper in their grief. He persuaded the women to start working in the Food for Work program started by an NGO, and for the children he organized sports events. He himself loved to play cricket, and so he organized cricket matches for children. Prashant engaged with other volunteers in helping the widows and children to pick up the broken pieces of their lives. The initial government plan was set up institutions for orphans and widows. However, this step was successfully resisted, as it was felt that in such institutions, children would grow up without love and widows would suffer from stigma and loneliness. Prashant's group believed orphans should be resettled in their own community itself, possibly in new foster families made up of childless widows and children without adult care. It is 6 months after the devastation of the super cyclone. This time, Prashant's wounded spirit has healed simply because he had no time to bother about his own pain. His handsome, youthful face is what the widows and orphaned children of his village seek out most in their darkest hour of grief. Now here, Prashant could recognize that, the children and women were becoming more sad. They were sinking actually. Sinking means they were becoming very sad day by day. So what he did was, he helped the women, or he motivated the women to start working in the Food for Work program started by an NGO. NGO is a non-governmental organization. These organizations, they come forward to help the people during the time of disasters. So women were sent there to work for the NGO, and then the children, he arranged he organized some sports events for the children, because children, they can't do any work as such, so they would like to play. So what he did was, he also liked cricket, so he organized games for the children. And he took the help of other volunteers to help the widows and orphans to return to normal life, because they were all feeling very lonely, isn't it? And what the government had proposed means government made a plan. They actually set up a separate institution for widows and orphans. But this proposal, what the government tried to help, this was actually rejected by Prashant. He didn't want that to happen, because keeping them in a home, an orphanage, is not going to help them to come out of their loneliness, isn't it? So he rejected that. So Prashant and these volunteers, they wanted to settle the orphaned children and widows in foster families where they could get love and security. So it was like giving a family, or a family can adopt an orphan child, so that that love and care can be given to that child. Like a guardian, you can say. Foster families, like guardians. They can take or they can adopt the children, those whose parents are dead. அவங்க அந்த மாதிரி பிள்ளைங்களை வந்து அடாப்ட் பண்ணி அவங்க வளர்க்கலாம். So this was the plan of Prashant and the team. So this is how they worked. 6 months passed by after the disaster, and now Prashant totally forgot the grief, that sadness of losing his mother. He had lost his mother, isn't it? So he was not thinking of that anymore, because he was very much involved in helping the others, and he forgot his own pain. Whenever these widows and orphans, when they have grief or when they are sad, they just looked at him and he used to smile, and that was a great relief for them as well as for him. So this is how Prashant helped the whole village. He took up the lead, he was the leader, and all this was done by Prashant. And this is the lesson, Weathering the Storm in Ersama, written by Harsh Mandir. And he is the author of this lesson, and this is the sixth lesson, in your Moments book. Thank you very much, children.